All right, in today's episode, we are covering many stories, including civil unrest in Western Ukraine, massive gas and oil tax on both sides, huge drone attack on Kyiv, downing of a Russian, let me get this right, an Su-35, and a whole lot more, including the fact that there is an announcement on the production of Patriot missiles in Europe. So, welcome back, friends and fans, to Dave Talk Stuff, Ukraine War Update. This is your Ukraine War Update for the 9th of July 2026. As the war continues, I continue to bring you comprehensive news and analysis from both sides. Now, in the gas and oil attack, Russia has often been asked by Ukraine to cut it out. And, Zelensky is still asking, complaining, that Russia routinely attacks civilian infrastructure. Yet, Ukraine also recently bragged about attacking civilian infrastructure at St. Petersburg. And it's not the only one. Now, the strange thing is, and if you notice the difference in the news, Ukraine rarely tells you what's hit. They don't always even show you pictures of what's hit. And often the file photo is cut in half. So you don't actually see what's hit. You only see the glow in the distance and the bottom half. Now, you see a lot of that from Iranian TV as well. There's a lot of people in Iran right now with cameras out their window. The difference is in Iran, they're less likely to get killed than in Ukraine, which is ironic, isn't it? We're bombing Iran for being despots, and we're funding Ukraine to be despots. Oh, but there's a war on. Yeah. So, concentrations of the usual attacks on the usual places by Russia, because they're focused on what they believe are the targets that will end this war. And so is Ukraine. Ukraine thinks it can destroy the Russian economy and force a full retreat. Because that's what the whole world did to Russia in World War I. Rather than accepting the realities on the battlefield had changed so much that it was pointless to go to war against Germany because they were no longer a threat to France. And the fact is, France was the one who declared war on Germany. But the British, being British, must stick their nose up and say, no, we'll ignore we'll ignore reality. And that's what's going on in Ukraine, ignoring reality. So, millions will die for the arrogance of the British Empire. And there seems to be not enough sensible voices out there paying attention to videos like mine, because a lot of people on the right don't want to be associated with anti-war because they think it's a left-wing thing. And you always hear about, don't put boots on the ground, someone might die. Well, that's the whole point, isn't it? But yes, no boots on the ground is exactly what we need in Ukraine. Not. So we have an attack in Sumy. We have an attack on Sumy. Kharkiv, multiple. Pavard, multiple attacks on Dnipro and the surrounding area, multiple attacks on Zaporozhye, multiple attacks in the Kherson area, and a lot of attacks on Odessa. Obviously, ships come in, and the cargo containers are attacked. Or actually, the warehouses and transport depots are attacked. And of course, as you can see, Russia has launched attacks multiple locations over the last 24 hours. Now, the thing is, say there was 200 attacks or 700 attacks or 500 attacks or even 100 attacks. The answer is always the same, isn't it? 20 to 30. And yet again, we'll get to that. The same amount of drones have hit. Now, where was... yes, here we go. Here we go. In the Battle of Dranivka, during a glide bomb run, a Su-35 was shot down as it approached from the south, crashing somewhere in Russian territory. And you notice no markers. But later, in Pravda and I think independent Kyiv, both said Dranivka was hit by glide bombs. Now, it's only Pravda that mentions the Su-35 being shot down. I'm talking about Ukrainian news. There are other news outlets, that, and including independent and Indian sources, that do say it was shot down. Now, I don't remember what Russian sources mentioned the aircraft was shot down, but there are multiple. So it could just be some news services put out the news earlier than others. But it was 18 hours ago. They should have had another story update by now, but they don't. And a lot of stories are always 18 hours ago. Actually, I've changed my time twice now to do these videos, but they keep changing the time the news comes out. Yeah, multiple explosions in Dnipro. There are tit-for-tat explosions every day. Right? Ukraine attacks, then Russia attacks. It's always led by Ukraine. You look at it. 18 years ago, they attack St. Petersburg. Then 12 hours later, they hit Dnipro. And, yeah, here we go. 6 hours, fuel depot was attacked with drones, followed by Russia's retaliation 4 hours ago, explosions in Kharkiv. See how it goes? How can you say Ukraine is the victim when they're always initiating the attacks? Oh, you can, because Zelensky always goes on TV after every attack and calls for revenge. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, so they always claim they're getting revenge. And so people just fall into that mentality of believing everything Zelensky says. Now, once again, no significant area has fallen. But as you may notice, the spread of the conflict is narrowing. And I believe this is putting a false sense of security in the Ukraine into believing, well, we're winning, we're making a difference. The Russians, they haven't got the fuel, they haven't done this and they haven't done that. Their tactics haven't changed. Ukraine lies, Ukraine throws men at the Russian bear, and the Russian bear slowly mauls its way forward. And everybody from France, Germany, Italy, privately, all these think tanks acknowledge a change in Russian tactics, acknowledge Russian advances, but all their public papers talk about failure of the Russians to gain significant ground. The only place I can see Russia failing is to lower its, I don't know if you lower its combat casualties, but we've yet to see whether or not there was any truth to some of the reported combat casualties on both sides. Because when you look at the body handovers, they are clearly stacked in Russia's favour. And Russia gets more live prisoners back and hands over more dead Ukrainians than they get back in dead Russians. And when locals were asked in, was it Seversk or Bakhmut? I think it was Bakhmut, when they were burying bodies. There were about 3,000. And when asked who was who, they said it's all green. Actually, no, I didn't think. No, was it all green or all red? Yeah, all green and red. Yeah. In other words, you couldn't tell. And they didn't stop to. They didn't even stop to count the tags. They collected all the tags, put them in a bag, handed them over to the Red Cross, and buried the bodies. But 3,000, I would say that was the last men who refused to leave Bakhmut when the Russians were coming. Whether it was soldier, civilian, volunteer, and there are probably a few Russian infiltrators caught in the But we haven't seen an aftermath since then. We have not seen Russia light up an entire area for a while. And we did see one big Omsk attack, not two, sorry. But we haven't seen them really line up. We have seen them, and I've said it, systematically destroy Kyiv, like they're pulling wings off a fly. And they're now beginning that with Danuvka. And I believe it's going to be a two-way battle. The Russians are going to pull up here and then pull up here, and they're going to attack from two distinct points. But for now, they're pushing up here. And as I said, this is a game of musical chairs in which push, push, push. There's only so many ways to go, but ultimately it is one big push, and it cascades out like a palm tree. And the aim of the Russians is not a direct east-west attack, but instead a north-south primary attack, an east-west asymmetric attack, but it can also now be a west-east asymmetric attack combined with secondary attacks, which may come from different directions. Most siege tactics, right, and we've seen this throughout history, favour the prolonged, those who engage in big, heavy, non-stop attacks wear down their men, and if they don't have a large resupply of men and equipment, see, that's why it's rare. I mean, Patton was only one of 6 armies, so he had others to take up what he couldn't to widen his line. So he was able to be a big spearhead because he had others to widen his lines to prevent him from being flanked. If the Russians put another army of, say, 120,000 in a big spearhead with tanks and rockets, if they could afford to do that. But see, the US had 10 years to prepare for World War II. And technically, Russia had 10 years to prepare. But Russia didn't have the levers of power to collapse the entire world economy, so they could reset all the wages back to almost near zero, and reset the cost of all goods back to near zero, and sit on their huge stockpile of gold, and use the promissory note system to basically say, well, you make these goods for us because we can supply you with all the materials. and we'll give you all these bonds, 30-year bonds. And these bonds over time are going to be worth way more than what we could pay you now. And the companies took it because they too were sitting on huge stockpiles of cash. And that's what the Depression enabled in America to do. That's why it's a unique war. It's very hard to replicate that situation. Now, it's also hard to replicate the Russian Revolution, yet that's exactly what they're trying to do. The left are trying to wear down Europe constantly. Now, the only difference is the left, they want war, so they're pro-Ukraine. Because they want to break up Russia. Because Russia would be divided up between India, Ukraine, and China without shots fired. Ukraine takes the hit. Because remember, you keep forgetting, Ukraine went from Russian ally to Chinese satellite. Then they tried to realizing that China was doing nothing for them, they tried to re-elect a pro-Russian, and that pro-Russian got thrown out of office by the Ukrainian nationalists backed by Europe and Obama. And they'd been spending a decade or more undermining Ukraine. Since getting rid of, by foul means, of course, anybody who's opponent to Zelensky. Now, because our European allies are such gutless wonders, the United States can call them out and nothing happens. You got to pick your battles. But I'm here to remind you that the Europeans are not the good guys in this war either. As I've often said, there are no good guys in this war. They all acting in selfish interest. Now, this channel is sponsored by you, the viewing audience. Empire Valves, that's one word, empirevalves.myshopify.com, your one-stop shop for enchanting treasures based on my writing. As I said, there is going to be a Patriot or PAC-3 assembly license. This was at the NATO summit in Ankara. Ukraine has been requesting a license for a lot of things. This is national productions for interceptors. To sustain its volume of air defense batteries and reduce its dependence on external deliveries and delays and budgetary uncertainties. In other words, they're going to basically produce these in Poland or Germany. There is a what is it? The Patriots are the most successful intercepts, according to the Ukrainians. There is an industrial precedent already in Europe, and Zelensky has a contract with Germany for 600 missiles, and Washington is granting a license to Berlin. But this company that they're extending the license to is a Ukrainian-German company, and it's part of already 3 suppliers for technical, right? So all they're doing is expanding what already exists. Now, US believe will take years to ramp up production, to ramp up it's not just the missiles, but the launchers. But there's also a pledge for training, and there was already going back to last, but equipment, training, and supplies will continue, but this will be extending it. And this is part of the $90 billion package that Europe, of which 60 is intended for military deliveries. And it's part of the long term build-up of Europeans in general. So it's not just Ukraine. But the 600 missiles are for Ukraine. The first 600. Now, this is part of extending European technologies as well, as they produce the second generation of Aster 30 missiles, which are progressing, but even slower. These are interceptors. Though no contract is signed, yes, they've been delivering missiles as they produce them to Ukraine. The Danish have limited supply of various products, not just air defense missiles. Saab, Saab is replacing the E3 Sentry AWACS. It is what it is. Europe was told, the United States has realised that exporting large amounts of military equipment is costly and too slow. It's not meant to be a long-term strategy. It was only a short-term fix. Yeah. So again, if you look at the number of missile impacts, it's always the same. There's always the same gap. And it's always the same thing. They never tell you what's hit. Now, other sources do tell you sometimes what's hit. But rarely do you see in Ukrainian media this story. Tensions in Ukraine. A protest at Kyiv after military and police tried to detain a draft dodger. There are towns in Kyiv and others across Ukraine where the local women have given shelter to men who don't want to go to war. In return for all the obvious help of having a man around the house, these women won't deliver. They provide food, shelter, and the men, whatever work they can do is done. But these men don't get any mail. They don't collect any welfare or benefits. They have to hide. They're cut off because the government puts everyone on government, on a government leash. And as I said, there's a strange behavior going on where the Russian military is targeting Ukrainian post offices to stop draft notices going out. So there's a tension in Ukraine because every time the Ukraine is so depleted, its police force, police and army, civil defense, sorry, that they can only come out in like 2 cars to pick people up. So there's only like six men to go out and pick up 2, recruits. That's such a slow and painful process. But see, Ukraine was always hoping that the majority would always just show up when called in. And so far, they have been right. Most do show up. But when those who don't show up, they're finding it harder and harder to pry. They're finding more and more, over 200,000, and less. And because Ukraine can't afford to operate its prisons, most of the prisoners are slowly and surely also pulled out and sent to the front lines. And you know what happens. They never come back. That's right. So there's a tension growing in Ukraine, a civil tension. Not just because there's been no election, because they won't honour their agreements to put things to the vote. It's always rubber stamped. You try and find out. You see, Ukrainian government, every time there's a vote, everybody just stands up and says, aye. No, there's no dissent. There's no allowed any dissent. You see what happened to that woman who dissented. She got murdered, and Europe pretended she wasn't. A Ukrainian parliamentarian was murdered by a Ukrainian nationalist. Of course, the attacks are ongoing. And of course, it involves aircraft, anti-aircraft missiles, and the usual collection of throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at incoming drones and missiles. And if you were in the same boat, you'd be out there with your you'd probably see half of America out there, shooting at the drones. Yeah, learn to skeet shoot. Much better. All right. Oil reservoir in Russia attacked. Why is this a story? Well, it was attacked by Ukraine, but it's been reported by Russia. You don't get stories like this from Ukraine, is my point. Now, Russia rarely tells us what they attack. Now and again, they do. Now, which is funny, they're blurring out the tips of the missiles. I think because the missile tips are color-coded, these are most likely multi... what do you call it? They're one or two things. These are... No, I forgot the word. Salandras, I think the Russians called them. These contain, petrochemicals to ignite a huge fire, or contain multiple bomblets. By the way, they just don't want you to know. Which is weird because I'm pretty sure the CIA know what the color coding, and I'm pretty sure everyone can look up the color coding on Russian missiles and eventually find them. I don't know why. Sometimes they hide stuff. I guess it's just the secret squirrel nature of them all, trying to always pretend. Now, according to Russia, this is where the FP5 Flamingo's heading. And why it's a story is it shows you that Samsung, they keep calling them the Flamingo a Ukrainian missile. Really? Last time I checked, Samsung was not a Ukrainian company. Though they are one of the largest military contractors in the world. Nowhere near Raytheon, of course, but still, it's a $1 trillion company. It's one of the largest in the world. And their production facilities in Ukraine produce missiles. So, yeah, that's why it's a story. Now, they're reporting that a Grenade Force Seeker conducted strikes on Ukrainian transports, railway locomotives, they destroyed 6 Ukrainian uncrewed surface vehicles. Now, there was a large-scale Ukrainian drone attack on Russia, and they go into the usual, we destroyed, and they probably have destroyed most of them, just like Ukraine destroys most, but not all. Yep, and the single day by ordering encouraging troops to Donbass. So the Russians are offering an immediate, that's this here. You withdraw from the Russian-speaking Donbass, and it's over. And that's, by the way, the Donbass is about 20% of the Ukrainian GDP. So why aren't they reporting a decline in the Ukrainian GDP? Russia's taken a large chunk of Ukraine, yet they don't report a decline in the Ukrainian GDP. And as far as I'm concerned, aid should never count towards a country's GDP, and that's why I think Ukraine's GDP is up, not down. Whenever Trump claims progress made towards Russia-Ukraine peace settlement, I think he is talking about the fact that Russia is offering an end and that Ukraine is also offering an end, and now he has to get them to meet in the middle. But the general consensus in Europe is, no, we want total victory. No, you're never going to get it. Trump has announced a scheduled conversation with Putin. It's a phone conversation. Ask him, yes. Yep. What would you ask? Well, good question. Because I'm speaking. The relationship is very good. A protocol of exchange, substantiated, business-like, highly constructive. The usual words. I think this is why so many people out there, as soon as they hear the usual words, you don't need to be told what they are. They're not always the same, but they are pretty much the same. Oh, yes. Uh-huh. I told you. Oh, yes, you did. Oh, yes. Many times. Oh, yes, indeed you did. Nothing is done. That's what's frustrating people. But it's, well, in geopolitics, everything has always moved slowly because people are resistant to change. That's not a Russian thing. It's not an American thing. It's a world thing. It's a person thing. You look at all the propaganda they've thrown at women, and yes, they've done a lot of damage to the West. But ultimately, large numbers of women are walking away from feminism, are dissatisfied with feminism. Countries have noticed that they're collapsing, and they should punish those who collapsed it. There's no going forward. You can't reward a peaceful retirement to those who have pretty much destroyed your country. No, you should deport them all to China. That's what you should do. They need to suffer the consequences of their actions. But this is the state of the war. And on the surface, it is slightly down. And we'll see. We'll see. Because we get patches like this. And sometimes they last days, sometimes they last weeks. But we saw how Bakhmut took 9 months. We've seen Koshnikovia take time. Now we've got 3 big centres. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 12, maybe. Would you like to be here for 12 years? I think no one, the economic collapse would happen long before then. Now, why is there a two? And everybody knows there's been a two-tier economy for quite some time. See, all countries have taken steps to protect their core economy, their stable core economy, and they're built around certain towns and certain ports. And of course, they all produce for the military, and the rest of the country supports it. And if you're not in a vital industry, your job is insecure. And people realize that by now. And I guess that's why Falling Down hit so hard, because that's when, it was produced at a time where America's cutbacks cut deep into the military industrial complex and put a lot of skilled engineers out of work who couldn't find jobs elsewhere because they just had skills that were not translatable anywhere else. This is what happens when you make everything so highly technical. And so Ukraine, of course, I mean, it doesn't want to settle the Ukraine war. And that's because millions out there will fly the flag, donate money, scream at their governments if they even talk about cutting back support for Ukraine. So the almighty vote is being held hostage. This is the failure of democracy, where a swing vote can hold governments hostage. And so you have a tyranny of the minority, because the majority won't assert themselves, because the majority don't have the skills, the organizations, and the information reach. Without you, there is no information reach. The vast majority don't get the information reach. And the only way to increase my reach is either I pay Google lots of money, or someone else does, or Google or Facebook, and I can't do that. I'm not a rich person. You notice all the successful streamers, except for bar a few, were rich before they were successful streamers. The others, they won highly publicized gaming competitions or beauty competitions, or were glazed by the American media. So don't tell me, oh, it's just a matter of your SEO or consistency. No, it's not. It's the support of the audience I have that leads to the increase. So thank you to everyone who has supported the channel, even if it's just a like on the a like. But I do need your financial support. So thank you to all those who have supported me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, bought my books, bought my merch. All my links are in the link tree. You can find that in the description, profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.